Cookware may be an everyday category, but building a premium consumer brand in this space is no small challenge. From manufacturing to product innovation, today we unpack what it really takes with Dhruv Agarwal from Stahl Kitchens on Building Actually with Abhishansa. Hi Dhruv, so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Cookware is one of those categories we use every day, and lately it's also becoming a bit of a personality extension for people who love cooking. And Style Kitchens has a bit of a role in shaping that conversation. So, I would love to start at the beginning. Your family has been into manufacturing cookware for international brands for 30 years. What made you think a consumer brand instead? And what do you think your family think of that call?
So, first of all, thank you for the question. And you're absolutely right. We've been making cookware or parts thereof, I think, for almost 30 years, 35 years now.
Okay.
And uh, what actually, where this started was actually with a love for sheet metal and, processing it, etc.
Mhm.
However, I think along the way, what we realize is that there is a tremendous requirement for good cookware. And my father, with his love for engineering, started
Mhm.
working with some of the best in India and with some
Mhm.
of the best internationally. Uh,
Mhm.
I had the chance to actually study in Germany. And during
Right.
my education over there, while my father was manufacturing cookware for a lot of different companies here in India,
Mhm.
when he visited me, he still bought some really good quality cookware for me while I was there. I had no aspiration at that point to join the business, none of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I did love the cooking that cookware provided, much better than what we had before he kind of
Okay.
visited. In fact, to the
Mhm.
level that I brought the cookware back with me while I was only allowed. You're allowed to only carry 20 kilos on a flight.
Mhm.
So with the 20 kilos that I was bringing back, I brought back 4 kgs of cookware, and I had no aspiration to join the family business at that point.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, I went to work with a real estate company. I went to a bank. I started another company which helped people work on how they remember stuff, etc. But at some point, when I did join the family business, what I did realize is what we're making for the best here is nowhere close to what those pieces of cookware were for me, and nowhere close to what is truly world class.
Mhm.
And just a simple change in the material, in the ways in the cookware from before to after,
Mhm.
made me fall in love with cooking. And we felt that if we are able to really kind of think of this, there must be enough and more people like me out there who've traveled, who've seen better, come
Mhm.
back and have only a mediocre level of cookware over here. So that kind of pushed us to move to the consumer side, because when we went to the big ones who we were manufacturing for and told them we can make it better, they said,
Hmm.
no, it doesn't. You don't try and tell us what to do. We know it well enough. So that the best way
Okay.
is to launch your own brand. And that's how
Mhm.
we kind of launched Stahl at that point. And it's been up onwards and upwards since.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey. From the family perspective, there was definite skepticism. When we kind of
Mhm.
brought the cookware out, the first question was, how are you going to take on our own customers? How are you going to take on the big guys? Then
Hmm.
there was a question. Uh, we launched the first tri-ply cookware in India. So the first manufactured, which is what really has helped us grow. It's a three-layered material: stainless steel,
Hmm.
aluminium, stainless steel. And I can talk later about why it is actually fantastic for Indian cooking.
Mhm.
But I remember showing the cookware to my father when we were making samples, and I said, we'll price this at about 3,200 rupees. This was a kadhai.
Hmm.
And he looked at all the competition, he looked at whoever we were making it for, and he says, Baki ke to 800 ke hain. How are you pricing this four times? And then he picks it up and he looks left and he looks right. And he asks me, where is the motor in this? And where is the wire in this? How are you going to sell it for that much?
Okay.
But I think luckily, in our family, we have a lot of faith in each other. So he kind of said, let's try it. Worst
Mhm.
come worst, my son will fail. And that's how Star started, or at least went on the journey of really premium quality products.
That's quite interesting. And if you could spill the beans of who those big guys or international brands were, which who you were actually catering to.
I think all of us know the ones that have been around for a good 40, 50 years. There are some very big brands in the country, and they do excellent stuff. I'm not taking away from them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was definitely a need to kind of level up. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is where we really kind of push this. These brands continue to sell well and they continue to adapt, and they are extremely good for the consumer that they are catering to. But you spoke about the love for cookware when we started. It's an extension of identity. And what we identified is that there are actually consumers who, for them, cooking is almost poetic. It's like writing a great piece of art, or a it's a way to express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way that a poet or a writer would want a good pen, a good chef or a good cook would want a great pan, tools that work well, last long, and feel good. So that is what we decided to kind of make, and that's how this came about.
Quite interesting. Lovely. And but what did you know about, like, what did you not know about this business when you started? And what did that ignorance cost?
I think I was lucky that I didn't know anything at all
Okay.
when I came in. And I'm not
Mm,
saying this loosely or lightly. I'll tell you what I did know. I did have a little bit of a sense of what manufacturing is. I
mm,
definitely knew how to sell, having been a real estate agent. What I didn't know
mm,
is what cookware was. I just knew
mm,
the emotion or the feeling it's supposed to give.
mm,
Uh, so the factors of, let's say, not learning or not knowing how to run an industry, not knowing what it meant to be a mass manufacturer that is only focused on cost, uh, it definitely cost me the ability to continue to be a supplier to some of these big brands. But what it definitely did give me an edge over is it helped us redefine what we perceive as value, or what we
mm,
perceive as quality, and what we perceive as, let's say, batch runs. Or, you know, there were people who told us, "You're a cookware company. Why are you thinking like an automotive company?" And we said, "We're from Pune.
mm,
Um, if you can buy a car without a scratch today, whether it's a Mercedes or a Maruti, why
mm,
can you not buy cookware without a scratch when it comes out of the shop?" And it is
mm,
these mindsets that kind of helped us really up our game in quality.
mm.
And that's, I think, so some things lost, some things gained.
Yeah.
It took me a while to learn how to run a factory for sure, but I think I was able to bring the aspect of the consumer into the manufacturing, rather trying to bring manufacturing to the consumer. And I think that was an interesting journey.
Got it. So you mentioned about triply. It
Yeah.
wasn't mainstream when you backed it. So in those moments, like, how do you know whether you are building a demand or, trying to force it to a market?
So it was a massive risk. There's no
Hmm.
question about that. Um,
Hmm.
Triply was there in small volumes in India, very small volumes, and a lot of people had actually considered this a failed attempt. So, in fact, one of
Okay.
the larger customers of ours, I remember telling my father that your son is going to run the company into the ground if he keeps pursuing Triply. So then the question is, and exactly the question, how do you get the conviction behind it?
Hmm.
Uh, we did see globally that there was a move towards better materials. And I think one of the
Hmm.
things that us as a company definitely understand is the use of materials. What we also saw is that Indian cooking is absolutely unique.
Hmm.
Uh, there is nowhere else in the world that you have the range or the diversity of cooking that we have over here.
Hmm.
If you look at the Western kitchen, it's a very calm and soothing place. It is usually a place where you kind of boil something for some time, then you put it in the oven, you sprinkle some salt and pepper on top, and you eat some amount of bland food. Our kitchen is like a war zone. The tadka is spraying out, the whistle is happening. On some side it's going. There is something going on. There are at least four different things being made, which
Hmm.
requires a very different flexibility, a very different buffer, a very different forgiveness in the kitchen.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was also, in this time of 2012, 2013, a move towards a healthier lifestyle. And one
Hmm.
of that was a choice of material. For whatever reason, right or wrong, people were preferring stainless steel over other cooking materials.
Hmm.
And stainless steel typically does not pass heat evenly, which means that wherever you put the gas, that is where the food is going to burn, and nowhere else um,
Okay.
does it actually cook.
Mhm.
And what ends up happening with that is you end up putting a lot of oil in to make sure that the heat spreads.
Yeah.
So we found triply, which is the material.
Mhm.
The aluminum in the middle actually spreads the heat, but you still have contact only with stainless steel, and that makes it that kind of fed into the movement that was happening, that we want food contact materials, but we want
Mhm.
lesser oil. And from that perspective, it was just natural that people would principally pick up this material. So
Mhm.
while we didn't have data to back it, and all logic said we should have failed, we went into the market saying that you try it. If you don't like it, we'll take it back. And I can still say we've only got about 0.2% of our cookware back. We still continue to give that claim. So I think we've been able to kind of find something that people like, and we went after it further and further.
So you talked about your customers, like, but what did customers teach you early that surprised you?
So one of the things that very early on one assumed, especially when you're selling premium or high-end cookware, is that consumers don't really use it. They've got house help at home, that
Yeah.
that they will spend on ingredients, they spend on crockery and cutlery, etc., and they'll not end up spending on the cookware. But I think very early on we realized that if you have a good tool, something that you're interacting with, which is spending time with, there can be love created for the product. And I remember a story very early on. There was this guy who came to me and said that, man, the first thing I wake up and do is pick up my Stahl pan. And he referred to this as a Stahl pan. And I said, why? He said, उसमें मेरी चाय जलती नहीं है. My tea doesn't burn in it. So I got into understanding why doesn't tea burn. So it turns
Hmm.
out that if you put tea in and it touches the metal, which is too hot, it actually releases, it's called stewing of tea, and it actually
Okay.
releases a bitter flavor into the tea. And a small thing like that can actually just change the way your morning is. So I think what we realize is that there are these small little nuances that happen in the kitchen every day, right from a cup of milk that you give a child, which is either overheated or underheated. And if it's
Mhm.
overheated, you have to wait 5 minutes for your child to sit while it cools down. If it's underheated, you have to put it back into the pan and reheat it. This cup of tea, a dabba in the morning. So small, small little things that are pain points, that are small
Mhm.
points of friction.
Mhm.
And we realize that if we can actually eliminate this friction, eliminate these chores and turn them into things that become easy, they turn into small rituals. They turn into daily rituals. The cup of tea in the morning, right before he actually even goes to the toilet,
Hmm.
it becomes a small ritual that a person undertakes that brings a little bit of joy, a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of kick to the day. And
Mhm.
we realize that what we're actually, so the customers taught us that we're not just making cookware, we're actually creating moments of joy and inspiration.
I was today's year old to know about कि चाय जल जाती है.
Yeah,
ये
it's
मुझे
it's quite crazy.
पता भी
Yeah,
नहीं था कि चाय जल जाती है. But I do
yeah,
agree कि we all have our favorite pans even if we are not cooking daily. तो
yeah,
अगर मेरे पास भी एक आध कोई पैन होगा जब मेरे को पास्ता बनाना होगा तो मैं वही उठाऊंगी और जब
yeah.
बिरयानी बनाऊंगी तो वही टाइप की उसी में बनाएंगे. एंड वो रोज भले ही काम नहीं आता हो बट हाँ वो एक नीचे दबा होगा और वो जब कहीं स्पेशल ओकेजन ऐसा मूड अच्छा हुआ कि खाना बनाएंगे तो वो निकल के बाहर आते हैं.
जी
सो या
बिल्कुल.
दो तो वो ज़रूर है. आई एग्री, टोटली एग्री. एंड यू हैव स्पोकन अबाउट सॉल्विंग फॉर इंडियन किचन स्पेसिफिकली
Yeah.
कि हम अलग तरीके से खाना बनाते हैं. सो व्हाट आर इंडियन कुकिंग प्रॉब्लम जो ग्लोबल ब्रांड्स यूजुअली मिस कर देते हैं?
So I think we have three fundamental uh, tools that we use differently, which global brands miss. What do you think these three? What is the three cookware that are unique to India that is used very little elsewhere in the world? What do you think they are?
एल्यूमिनियम.
No, so I'm not talking about material. I'm talking about shapes.
Hmm. कुकर्स.
Cooker is
कढ़ाई.
definitely one. Kadhai is second.
Third I'm not sure.
Third is hamara tawa.
Okay.
And if you go to any Western brand, they'll maybe have what they call a griddle for pancakes, which we consider a tawa.
Hmm.
Let's say a brand like Stahl has 14.
Hmm.
Kadais, usually you go to a Western brand, they'll give you one Chinese wok. Stahl has 15 or 16 sizes. You go to a pressure cooker, they'll usually have one 6-liter cooker or one 5-liter cooker. We will have 13 or 14 different sizes in the country. So these
Hmm.
are, and what happens is with each of these, there are certain nuances. The way we introduce the oil, we have a habit of bhunoing masala. So we will
True.
actually kind of release flavors in the food systematically, which nowhere else in the world it is. They all put, maximum they'll put is some onions and garlic, and then they will let the food cook and put spicing on top. Our
Hmm.
spices, we start with spices and we start with the release of flavor,
Hmm.
which means that if the pan's temperature is not controlled, it's a very small window where the food will either go burnt, or it'll remain undercooked, it'll remain kacha. And that is a nuance that in India, uh, it is more critical than anywhere else in the world. So I think that is where, in a simple line, the temperature control for the Indian kitchen
Hmm.
is significantly more uh, is significantly more important than anywhere else in the world, apart from the chefs that I spoke about.
So, other than this, how does it, how does designing for Indian cooking actually mean in practice? What do you have to change? What are the things you have to, consider before working on this?
So I'll give an example. Um, when we, when you design a pan, there are many aspects. One is the food going to stick? Is it not going to stick? Is it going to overheat? Is it going to underheat? Is it a thin layer like a dosa, or is
Hmm.
it something thick like a chila or a roti? Is it dal, or the same utensil has to be able to cook a dal, but it also has to be able to make a bhindi. It has to be able to make an upma, but also has to be able to make a pasta. So
Hmm.
one factor is the variety of products that a cookware has to uh, that it has to deal with. So when we design a pan, a simple thing like, let's say, the tawa. If we have to make a dosa, is the burners can be very small to very large, and it depends. If you've got a high end home, typically they have very large burners. If you have a small home, typically by the three burners, two of them are very small. It still has to spread the heat to the end, so that your dosa is not red only in the middle, it's red throughout. I don't know if
Hmm.
you've tried this, the red dosa in the middle and a white dosa on the sides.
Yeah.
But a small thing like that, if you change zero point 0.2 mm, that's as thick as my nail, you change that much in the thickness of the material, it will either become red at the sides or it will remain white at the sides. And that is the
Amazing.
nuance that you have to get into while trying to design your cookware for the Indian kitchen.
Amazing. It's damn interesting. बट एज यू मेंशन कि आपकी एक कैटेगरी में जैसे 14 प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, प्रोडक्ट लाइन है,
Ji,
एंड इंडियन कुकिंग में यूजुअली बहुत अलग अलग वैरायटी ऑफ डिशेस बनती है.
ji.
फॉर वंस हम मान लेते हैं कि वी विल हैव अ डोसा तवा फॉर बेसिक चीलाज और डोसाज एंड अनदर
Hmm.
तवा फॉर रोटी.
Hmm.
So ये बाकी categories, most of the people actually would use limited amount of kitchen utensils for this. चाहे वो जल रहा हो या नहीं जल रहा हो. So how does that work out for you guys and for brands or for consumers? क्या यहाँ पे कुछ information की कमी है, awareness की कमी है, जिसकी वजह से this is the reason?
So one has to just assume first of all that a consumer is going to buy fewer pieces. Space is naturally a constraint. A city like Mumbai, the kitchens are really small. You may go to other areas where there are many utensils. And if you see the Indian consumer, a lot of them have moved to buying SUVs, for example, because it is the most versatile. मैं बच्चे को भी बिठा सकता हूँ, I can go off road, I can keep it in the city, etc. And the Indian consumer kind of caters to that. And I think that's where a brand like Stahl comes in. That
Hmm.
when we start actually designing,
Hmm.
we try and make sure that right at the outset, how do we actually think of the cookware in multiple use case scenarios? And what I mean by that is, in fact, we'd come up right in the beginning with पांच बर्तन जिंदगी के लिए, as a concept. एंड उसमें एक तवा था, एक कढ़ाई थी, एक कुकर था, एक कैसरोल था और एक फ्राइंग पैन था. And that's all
Hmm.
you need. And right from, let's say, the Indian kitchen doesn't have an oven, but baking is becoming a big factor. So can your cookware actually also allow you to bake? So how you design the lid, how you
Mhm.
design the material, how you put it together, how you kind of instruct. But you're right, awareness is a massive factor in this. And that
Mhm.
is why, let's say local samosa, social media, etc., it becomes a very large part in how we work or we educate the customer. We work a lot with influencers, a lot of
Right.
recipe influencers. And in fact,
Mhm.
in a lot of times, we ask them not to call us out, but to actually educate on how to kind of create recipes in a simple manner.
Mhm.
How do you make, for example, a cake in a frying pan, or how do you make a cake in a pressure cooker? You know, literally, like if you just take a pressure cooker and you half close the lid without a whistle, must make sure there's no whistle on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can become very dangerous. But even something as simple as that can actually create an oven kind of a scenario. So, as a brand, I think what we definitely work on is trying to find people who affect opinions, and this may be even opinions on on things like coating, on things like, and I'm sure that's a topic that a lot of people are always curious about. But even things like coatings, on cooking styles, on versatility, I think that's what brands need to do and work
Mhm.
intelligently on these factors.
करेक्ट एंड वन ऑफ दिस थिंग्स एज अवेयरनेस की जब हम बात करें तो आई थिंक एक पेशेंस की भी बात होती है बिकॉज एज अ कंज्यूमर जब भी हम ट्राई प्लाई क्वेर की बात करते हैं तो देर इज समथिंग ना कि आपको यू हैव टू सीजन द पैन and it
Ji.
takes a little bit of your time to season the pan. You try test with water droplets to figure out it's
Yeah.
it's even so that your cook like your food
Yeah.
doesn't burn. So yeah,
Yeah.
it comes with a lot of patience also. And इंडियन फैमिलीज में बस इतना टाइम नहीं होता कि वो ये करें. आई थिंक इट्स अ प्रोसेस. तो शायद इवॉल्व होते होते शायद आएगा.
But iska ek, I'll tell you the flip side.
हम्म.
So definitely, when you work with a natural material like stainless steel, uh, and when you work with any natural material, it is always a little harder to cook than, let's say, if you have a coating or you have a half coating or something else. One of the reasons that you have coatings, etc., is to make convenience or to make things easier. But I'll give an example. In 2016, I met a lady who worked at a home, somebody who got our cookware. And this lady was a single mother. She had four children. Uh, you know, Definitely not, I think, what one would refer to is as India 2, just about making ends meet. And this she would cook in this cookware, in the Stahl cookware, every day at this person's home. She was in Bombay, and she would come at 8 o'clock. You could set the time by the time she came. When she came in at 8 o'clock, um, she would get her work done and leave. One day she asked this person to procure the cookware for her. She said, "Ye mehenga rahega. It will pakka be an expensive product. I'm willing to pay." And she was willing to pay about one fourth of her salary to get one piece of cookware.
Mhm.
So the question that this person naturally asked, and later this was told to me, was, "Why would you buy this cookware?" So she said that I have four daughters. One is 16, one is 14, one is 10, and one is 8. And the 16 and 14-year-old helped me get the 10 and the 8-year-old out in the morning. They have to get to school and dabba banta hai. And the one thing that I can do with this cookware is I can leave it on the gas and I don't have to worry ki khana jalega. So while patience is one end of the spectrum,
Mhm.
the convenience and the flexibility and what I talked about, forgiveness that this cookware has, is the other end of the spectrum. So while I have to season the pan, there is also this little bit of time where
Mhm.
I've had somebody else tell me, a friend of mine tell me, that they left poha. So this guy had gone and bought some cookware and he got it home, and his family told him, "Man, you've got such expensive cookware. You're a fool. You don't know your friend has made a fool out of you." Until they left poha on the gas for 2.5 hours. It went dry. It didn't burn. And that is the other end of the spectrum. So yes, good things take patience. If you have to
Yeah.
learn how to drive a Ferrari, it takes time. But once you do it, it can be a lot of fun.
Superb analogy. But this brings me to the next question because of your example. So, premium cookware has grown, but India is still value conscious. How, how have you thought about building in that segment?
So I think the word is what you use is India is value conscious. I don't think they're necessarily price conscious.
Mhm.
Uh, and I bifurcate. So two things. I think when we said we'll bring world class cookware to India, I think what we've done is we've taken a 100 euro or 120 euro pan, uh, which is at, let's say, a super premium level, and we've actually managed to deliver that to the Indian consumer at a 3,000 or a 4,000 rupee level. So we've actually brought world class at a very good price point to the country today. Number
Mhm.
one. Number two, um, there are aspects. So, for example, you buy one of these pans, you don't have to change it for 8 and 10 and 12 years. So, it is an upfront investment, but you don't end up having to kind of replace it at all. So, even our coated pans, for example, we've just
Mhm.
launched this new artisan shield, which is a
Mhm.
brand new coating. I think there are only 3 or 4 factories in the world making this. You can take a knife to it. I don't know if you've seen our latest ad, the one where we say, Kuch bhi nahi chipkega. So we are saying for 5 years we are guaranteeing the coating कि कुछ नहीं चिपकेगा.
Mhm.
And the reason being, we can take a knife to it, it will not scrape off. Now the pan is expensive, but if you take for the factor that you should all other non-sticks you have to technically replace every 6 to 8 months, we are cheaper. The
Okay.
third aspect is with tri-ply, and we recommend using a low flame. You know what the gas scenario is in the country. So we actually calculated you end up saving 2.1 cylinders of gas a year simply by cooking with our pan, which again kind of makes the pan free every 1.5 years. So for even for a value conscious consumer, the challenge is buying it upfront. You pay for it upfront, but it will give you a lot of value over its lifetime.
So, is this
And the
not your
joy.
marketing campaign?
We're running it now. We're learning how to market. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So for a lot of people, you know, Stahl Kitchens or other brands would be, they are looking at how we look at aspiration, how buy this kind of watch when you
Yeah.
earn, when you
Yeah.
buy you'll buy something, these kind of shoes, and you'll earn better when you have savings, and when you want to flaunt, this is adult money for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when does that, premium, they people stop seeing this as an aspiration and it's becoming like a utility. It's like a daily use kind of thing. When does that start being for an Indian consumer?
I think when they realize the value that it brings on the day to day, these soft aspects that I said, like a daily cup of tea, when it actually starts tasting a little better. Let me try and answer this slightly differently. I think the Indian consumer, the aspirational part, uh, comes from when you're kind of showing. I think, at least from a cookware perspective, a lot of it is for an internal pleasure, an internal, what you would like. Like I would imagine, I can't. I If I ask you last time that you had a discussion on the soap that you use with
Hmm.
someone, I don't think you'd easily be able to remember. But if I
Yeah.
ask you what soap you're using, I'm sure you're very clear which one, why, maybe one different one for your face, maybe one different one for your hands. And you're
Yeah.
definitely not paying, like, it's not like a, let's say, a very basic soap, there's it's speciality. So it is an aspiration to get these, but it is also utility because you're seeing it do something for you.
Hmm.
A face cream of a particular type will do something for you. A body soap of a certain type will do something for you, and they are not cheap by any standards. If you take, whatever it is. So I think cookware, or at least the segments that we are in, which is more internal usage, more that I'm spending time with the product. I think you buy it as an aspiration, but when you realize what it is doing for you day to day, when you realize that khana jalta nahi hai, that I can actually create a great meal for my family, when it is easier for me to cook and also clean up, घिसने में मेरे हाथ, they don't become, what do you say, wrinkly. It
Hmm.
becomes, it moves from aspiration to utility. The aspiration will always continue to be there, but you're
Mhm.
ready to use the aspiration more on a day-to-day basis, and you're also ready to tell others about it. I
So
don't
what
know if
kind
that
of
answered your
brand?
question. Yeah.
What kind of brand you want to be? Aspirational brand or a utility based brand?
I think, in a nutshell, what we are really trying to drive is become a tool. Something that a person wants to use every single day, because it works well, it lasts long, and it feels good. But it's something that a person is also proud to show off. Something that I you want to show that I own this. That it is something that, it's I've not just got just about anything. I've actually invested in myself and invested in a
Mhm.
good tool. And I would say, and it's an easy way to say, I'd like to sit at the cross of aspiration and utility. But I think if it's purely aspirational, people won't continue to recommend us. And if we are purely utility, people will not want to rebuy us. So I think that's
Okay.
where we sit.
Okay. Amazing. So as you mentioned, people are, quite aware about what they cook on. Something interesting has changed actually in the last few years. People are not just thinking about what they cook, but
Yeah,
increasingly also thinking what they cook on.
yeah,
Everyone has their own pan. So there's a
yeah,
lot of information circulating around steel, coatings, non-stick, toxins, what's safe,
yeah,
what isn't.
yeah,
From your vantage point, what is changing in consumer awareness?
yeah.
And are there any, misconceptions in this conversations too? Things people have become overly fearful about, confused about.
So I think there has been an evolution in the way people consume information.
Mhm.
And I'll break this down in two aspects. One is the opinion leaders themselves, and then the second is the people consuming it. Whether this is on social media, whether this is through, whether they are influencers, whether this is through newspapers, etc. I think first of all, opinion leaders are realizing that consumers do not just take everything at face value anymore, unlike a couple of years ago. I think the newer generation is challenging everything. And I think, with things like AI, with more information coming in, claims that consumers are making, that opinion leaders are making, will be tested a lot more. So if you ask me, I think opinion leaders are starting to form more informed decisions rather than just, I use the word rabble rousing, saying something for the sake of getting popularity. So I think that is one aspect, that the relationship of people talking about information and their relationship with information has changed. Uh, the second thing is, in spite of this, I think consumers are no longer taking what others are saying at face value. They are actually going in and researching. For example, we make non-stick cookware, and we definitely face a lot of questions, increasingly more and more questions on whether our coatings are safe or not. And earlier, what would happen was a consumer would come in and say, "इसमें ये नहीं है, ये safe नहीं है." Today, as we are starting to kind of certify, we're using third party certifications. Like, for example, we are FDA approved for our products. We're LFGB, which is the highest level of food grade certification, the German certification. People are seeing these certifications, they're actually taking that into consideration in the buying decision. So, 2, 3 years ago, where the consumer was, let's say, absolutely against non-stick, today is willing to realize that convenience is also a part of creating good habits. So they're kind of
Mhm.
getting into a discussion: is fat better for me, or is having non-stick better for me? And those kind of weighing is going on, rather than just fat. What I mean by fat is oils and other masalas, etc., versus non-stick. And as you're starting to read, they are forming more and more informed opinions and are willing to take choices that, let's say, 2, 3 years ago, through rabble rousing, through misinformation, people would just believe everything and kind of follow the herd. And I
Mhm.
think that is where uh, the thought process of the opinion leadership has changed, as well as the consumer's relationship with influencers has changed. I think consumers also realize that there is in influencers a mix between people who work with brands and people who are actually genuine. So even when we, for example, talk to opinion leaders, We let them form their opinions. We give them what information we have. We give them counterpoints as well, and let them
Mhm.
actually come up with their own thought processes before they actually either talk about our products positively or negatively. And I think as a brand, we have to also, if we allow people to be honest, I think it'll also help us as a brand in the long run to develop trust.
Mhm. But are there any misconceptions?
Personally, if you ask me, I think let's say with PTFE, what people call Teflon, I think there
Mhm.
are certain concepts where I don't think there is enough research that directly links it to ill health. So there is definitely always a question of whether PTFE is good or bad for you.
Mhm.
Whether iron pans actually infuse nutrients into your body or not is again a concept which I think still needs to be ratified. I'm not going to give an opinion. I have an opinion on it, but
Mhm.
I think that is something that the question is: are there misconceptions? I think there are conceptions around this, and I think people kind of should read a little more about it, form more informed opinions, and I
Mhm.
think this would be uh, interesting to see where people go. One thing is for sure that with COVID, I think people's relationship with cooking and its impact on health has definitely improved. I think people are realizing the impact of having good, nutritious food and
Mhm.
its impact on overall well being. So I think that
Mhm.
is interesting. And by having good tools like ours, it people go into the kitchen a lot more, are able to cook with lesser oil and cook tastier. And I think overall, I think that is a lot better for health, and it's bringing people, or it's bringing joy in the kitchens today.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
has social media changed what people aspire to own in the kitchen? That the way it changed for food itself. A lot of people are on social media watching food reels, saving those food reels, even if they are going to cook or not, going on YouTube, learning new recipes, even if they have time or not. But there is an aspiration. Someday, one day, we'll cook this one also.
yeah,
Make pasta dough from the scratch, maybe.
yeah.
So, how social media has changed what people aspire to own in the kitchen?
I think for us, it's been one of the biggest influence in marketing. I think social media, in fact, I don't think social media just influences the end consumer. I think social media also influences social media. And what we've seen is, for example, if a certain set of influencers start working with a particular kind of cookware, I'll not just say brand, but a kind of cookware, we'll slowly, and it works well, we'll slowly see a lot of others also kind of switch to that form of cookware.
Mm-hmm.
Recipes, what I was speaking about earlier, hacks. I think a lot of people like to try out hacks. And in fact,
Hmm.
one interesting aspect is it's not only, one would assume people sitting and wanting to try out, but we've seen a lot of children come into the kitchen because of, you know, generally seeing their parents trying out more. It's become a place where, in trying
Hmm.
out recipes, children have got involved, and it's become a activity that people do together.
Hmm.
I think the social media has definitely affected the relationship between how food is made at home. People help share recipes with people cooking at home, and then naturally also they say ki wo wala bartan bhi chahiye. So social media definitely affects the perception of the products at home, for sure. At
Hmm.
least we've seen that.
Yeah. You have launched various products in the category
Yeah.
kitchen space. How do you distinguish between, meaningful innovation and, adding features that are just interesting on paper?
So I think the first thing is we always go back to, for us, convenience is a very large part of, convenience and ease to cook is a very large part of how we design the product.
Hmm.
And the second part is also where we are trying to see if there are certain specialty areas where there could be, unique products that we fit in. And what I mean by this is we recently launched something called the biryani handi. So we saw
Hmm.
that there was this very specific area in certain parts of South India where they were looking for a biryani handi that could cook about 5 kilos or 6 kilos of rice. And a small thing like just putting a stainless steel dum ka lid along with a glass lid that could later be brought to the table It was a small little gap,
Hmm.
but it is amazing how much people have appreciated the ability to cook dum in a stainless steel handi, which is designed in a particular way to allow the heat to transfer and the dum lid, but also to be able to bring that to the table. We've created a omelette pan, so a pan very specifically designed to kind of flip omelets. And
Right.
if you listen enough, I think you will find these small areas. And then of course you have to go back to all that I said, that the right material, whether it's transferring the heat, whether the handles are balanced well, whether the handles are staying cool, whether it is flipping. Do you actually create a 3-degree circle at the top, or do you create a 3-degree radius, or do you create a 6-degree radius at the top? Those are factors that then you engineer.
No, I understand about the omelette pan because we are in the we were on the hunt. My husband and I love to experiment with different kinds of omelette. One day we are making Italian omelette, one day we are making Japanese omelette. We're
Yeah,
doing different kind of things, and it still burns. We are still
yeah,
we know the problem. Like, not everything is not. We are not able to experiment properly. We understand
yeah.
the problem that there is a need of omelette pan.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It is actually amazing how there are these micro needs, but
Yeah.
they're big enough that it pains enough people.
So, what's one product or bet you were most confident and didn't work for you?
So I think one product that we tried to bring to the market, which maybe it was also a marketing thing or education that we didn't do, but lightweight cast iron. So we
Okay.
actually went after lightweight cast iron in a way that we thought, cast iron is heavy, older people want to use it. They would want to, can we create it with handles that stay cool? Traditional cast irons handles become hot. Or can we create it with a treatment that doesn't allow it to rust, so you don't have to season it? We did all of that, and we ended up making the product too expensive. So I think sometimes we end up over engineering something that is very simple. And
Hmm.
that was a product that the few people who really took to it loved it, but in
Hmm.
general we saw that people didn't trust it enough to buy it at the price point. So that was a product that I think we weren't able to talk about enough. I still think if we were to kind of relaunch it, it would do well,
Hmm.
but that was a product that didn't do as well as we thought it should.
Okay. So,
It's
because
still
you
my favorite pan though. Still my absolute favorite pan though. Yeah.
maybe time to revamp it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, because you come from manufacturing background, I'm curious how much of your advantage comes from that foundation.
I think the fact that we have manufacturing has allows us to get into the technicality of the product and not just the consumer need. And it allows us to play across the entire spectrum where we understand, let's say that you and your husband need omelets, but how does the radius on a pan actually affect the ability to flip it or to kind of create the heat transfer that works perfectly for it, and then have the ability to try multiple variations of it without having to go to a vendor and change the tool and pay for continuous prototyping.
Hmm.
So I think our ability to listen to the consumer
Hmm.
and deliver what is needed is very short, and we
Got it.
can do micro experiments which if we didn't have the manufacturing, I don't think we could have done.
Got it. And but somewhere you feel that it stops being a moat and starts being a burden.
uh, at some point, I think if one wants to expand categories and says that
Hmm.
the only way that I'm going to do it is or test the market is by setting up a new factory, then the risk taking becomes a lot higher.
Hmm.
So, and what happens with that is naturally when you are kind of experimenting, you want to experiment within your own factory. But I think my personal view is if one is able to figure out that there's a demand, having the manufacturing capability will allow you to keep control on the product to a certain point.
Hmm.
So I think as one scales, I think where the interesting point is can you set up manufacturing enough or the nuances of manufacturing enough to be able to test the product while kind of speaking to consumer demand. So if you ask me, I don't think the moat disappears. It allows you to continue to keep the moat. It's just that I think as a business head, you have to wear multiple hats. You can't just wear the consumer hat, you also have to wear the production hat. But that also then leads to an optimized product
Mhm.
and an optimized engineering solution.
And what do you think founders usually discover too late about, supply chain?
I think supply chain, what supply chain typically is a good 65 to 70% of your cost, or in fact, in some cases, even up to 80-85% of your cost.
Hmm.
And if, as a founder, you don't build in the right systems to maintain your supply chain, maintain inventory, understand where quality can be right or wrong, you tend to over order or you tend to under order.
Hmm.
uh, it can really play havoc. And I'll give an example. So, one of the things that we do as a factory or as a company is every once in a while I'll take my we'll go to a McDonald's and then we'll go to a local restaurant. And if you look at McDonald's is, I think, one of the most successful restaurants in the world, not just in India. I think if you think about it, whether we like it, we don't like it, whether it's good for us, not good for us, is a separate issue altogether. It is fundamentally a successful restaurant system. Its entire game is supply chain. Its entire game is to be able to put food in front of you within a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes of you ordering, and consistently, no matter where you are. And that is one of the reasons it has scaled. Now, imagine you go to a restaurant and you order a roti, a dal, and a sabji. And the kitchen makes the dal and the kitchen makes the roti and sends it out. It has taken roughly about 12 minutes. And about 6 or 7 minutes later, your sabji comes. By now, your roti is cold. Your dal has
Mhm.
turned cold. Okay, you send it back. Now the sabji is turned cold. You are frustrated at this point. The restaurant can be the best restaurant in the country. The waiter and the service can be the best in the country. You could have heard amazing reviews about it. But the kitchen, which is the supply chain, has failed. Will you go there again?
Right.
And that is the view that we take on supply chain. You are creating a promise. If the supply chain doesn't deliver, you will
Mhm.
fundamentally fail.
Correct. Now, I want to touch upon something not spoken about enough. Like, what did does building a consumer brand change inside a legacy manufacturing business day to day? Like, what specifically did you have to change about how Autopress India was run when you decided to build a consumer brand? Not the, strategic stuff, like the actual day to day things that created friction with how the business had already been done.
So I remember when we were uh, right at the beginning, when we were kind of doing moving into this triply market, and
Hmm.
I was talking about the kadhai and the motor in it. So we went to a packaging supplier to redesign it. So we went to a designer to redesign our packaging.
Mhm.
And one of the discussions was, can we not just go to our packaging guy and get him to do an artwork? And
Mhm.
um, the question was, do we get that done at, let's say, whatever X amount, or do we spend a lot on creating a premium packaging that will help us price better?
Mhm.
And I remember the conflict. I wanted to spend roughly about 3% of our turnover on the packaging. And my father was like, this should not cost more than, let's say, zero point 0.2 or 0.3%.
Right.
However, that changed the game,
Hmm.
because if no matter how beautiful a product is, or the way sometimes I put it, if, let's say, a woman comes and she's extremely beautiful, but the bindi instead of here is over here, everything else you will forget about. You will just see that this is off center.
Hmm.
So it's these small nuances that kind of had to shift. The other thing is, I think, where the day-to-day friction happens is when we buy machines. It's very easy to measure. उसका वजन है, किलो का भाव है. It is, you know what you're getting for the money. You know how much output it is going to get. But if you're going to go and spend, let's say, the same amount of money on a ad film, you don't know whether it is going to deliver. It is not. Once it's shot,
Hmm.
it's passed. There's no,
Hmm.
so that mindset that I'm spending on the intangible instead of the tangible is where the major shift or the major mindset differences come in.
Got it. And your father has built businesses that manufactures for, other people's brands. You're
Yeah.
building your own brand using
We're
the.
building it together. So I'm going to take a minute and a step back. We're actually building it together. I
Hmm.
cannot manufacture without him. मेरे को customer समझ में आता है, but yeah, sorry, go on, please. I didn't want to
No, no,
interrupt you.
understandable.
Yeah, yeah,
Credit where it's due. I
yeah,
understand. Yeah.
absolutely.
So you guys are building it together, but you guys have different segments of consumers, right?
Yeah.
Right. So has there been a moment where those two things come into direct conflict?
So it has come in regularly. And
Hmm.
as a business now, we do less than 2% of our business with other customers as OEM. We're now
Okay.
actually almost exclusively with our brand. And that's pretty much where we are.
I would want to know more about it. Why that?
Hello? I think what we realize is as we grew, um, it requires two different mindsets of how to run the business. The consumer business is a very price first or a cost plus business. So I have a certain cost and then I will add a small amount of margin, and it defines a certain return on investment. Whereas when you are creating a brand, you kind of approach it from the value I want to create in the world, and then I build my systems behind that perspective. So if you want to play in the premium space, uh, I cannot necessarily optimize all of my operations uh, to be able to cater for scale, because this space needs me to experiment, which means my manufacturing, my changeovers, the way that I approach work has to cater to be able to do quick changeovers, to be able to experiment. But the other business requires me to make sure that my costs are controlled and I am only building for scale. So consistent output of the same thing again and again. And those two things don't exist as easily as one would like them to.
Hmm.
And thereby, I think if we were trying to make a low cost brand, maybe we could have done both. But since
Hmm.
we're trying to actually really deliver consumer delight, it needs us
Hmm.
to experiment, which needs us to be able to shift our manufacturing capability fast, or our thought process, or our toolings fast, and that doing OEM would not allow as easily.
I think we really appreciate your father to take that bet on this
I'm
because
I'm a very lucky young man. I promise you that. I promise you that. I think I look at it this way. I've joined, and he's kind of played a role of an investor, but a very
Hmm.
hands-off investor in a way. So I I think I'm truly blessed in that he has immense trust and faith, and has taken some of those big leaps of faith that are required to be able to make this transition. And I know
Hmm.
there are days that are really tough for him, and we have our battles for sure. But I think it has taken. He's definitely somebody that one can learn how to kind of let go more than anyone else. It's really something to. Uh, I'm lucky, like I said.
Yes, that's interesting. And what's something your father got right about business that you only appreciated later?
I think his understanding and his trust of people, and his ability to kind of let people do what they're supposed to do and do it well. So I think I
Hmm.
came in as a very hyper pushy and a very okay, do it my way and do it now. And I
Hmm.
think in fact, learning from my father, let's say that he was pushy and let's do it his way instead of mine, I probably wouldn't have continued. I wouldn't have been given the freedom to try, to fail,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
experiment, etc. And fair, I'm his son, but it's finally his business and he's got the experience. And in spite of that, he's kind of, let's say, put guardrails around, if I may, and let me experiment, fall, and kind of grow. And I think that's something I didn't appreciate in the beginning. I thought, he's still trying to pull his own way, or he's trying to constrict me too much. But I look back now and I realize that he actually gave me a lot more leeway than most fathers give their sons. So I hope I'm being able to pull that also. Then, yeah,
I'll send this clip to your father.
I
You
appreciate
should
that. I would really, yeah.
you should send it to him on birthday. May a special gift from your end.
I, no,
So
I would really appreciate. I will. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No,
So
sorry.
we
Go
were
on.
talking about social media, how you're leveraging social media, how you're working with influencers, opinion leaders as well, and it seemed like a usual bet. A lot of cookware brands do
Yeah.
that. So, how much does that actually work as a growth lever for you?
So the way that that's actually been one of our main forms of marketing. We've actually not done much else, to be very honest. And the reason being, what we've seen is we can talk about ourselves in as much as possible. We It is important that people who actually use it day to day and have faith in the product push it. But our relationship with influencers and social media has also been very different than what a lot of other brands do. We've never
Okay.
been overt. Like right from the beginning, we've been okay if we'll send our products to our potential partners. We'll tell them to use it. We'll tell them that we'll only collaborate if you really like it. If not, please keep the product. Tell us how it has to be improved, and we'll figure out. And we typically work with them over longer durations of time, because it also then kind of feeds back into what can be improved, what can't be improved, and
Mm-hmm.
that relationship builds. So I think for us it's been important because we've also approached it organically. I think there are a lot of brands who try and use uh, the social media as brand ambassadors, but I think the consumer or the consumers of the influencers, their followers, can definitely see through when it's a push versus when it's being used organically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us also, one of the biggest things is we genuinely do pay attention to the cooking experience, but also to the aesthetic of the product. So it naturally makes for our influencers, uh, it actually supports them to be able to use it. I mean, I imagine that it is actually a good product to use.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the consumers see that. I think if you
Mm-hmm.
make an inferior product and you push it through social media, I don't think it's going to work. And I think that's with any form of advertisement also.
So, you say there is an actual conversion with it?
We've seen conversions.
Mm.
We've seen engagement rates. We have a way of measuring it, and it definitely works for us.
So, what's other kind of marketing that has surprised you other than the collaborations, these influencer collaborations?
So right at the beginning, I used to spend time at farmers markets, and I used to
Okay,
spend
interesting.
time at kind of putting up stalls and spending
Mm-hmm.
time on the ground talking to consumers,
Mm-hmm.
talking to them about the product. And every once in a while, I will still end up doing that, or we will end up putting up exhibitions, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems like an inefficient way to spend time, or to kind of put the product out there. But what we've seen is, uh, it definitely has an impact that when a person touches and feels the product and it's a good product, they go and talk about it. They will pick it up. They will go and talk about it. They will end up
Mm-hmm.
picking up a few.
Okay.
I remember enough people, I've met enough people now who even 8 or 9 years ago say that I met you. I remember seeing your stall at so and so farmers market at that
Mm-hmm.
place before. And we put up the stall in an interesting way. We'll do a little bit of a demo, we'll do something else.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make sure it is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But that definitely, I think, created that word of mouth for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the biggest factors of growing is word of mouth.
And
The other,
what really
yeah.
drove growth for you?
So we've been a GT first brand. We've been a general trade first brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, what we also realize is that our country, uh, the uh, the it doesn't matter who or how rich you are or how poor you are. There is a inherent nature of going to retail outlets. भैया कुछ नया दिखाना, भैया
Mm-hmm.
कुछ अलग आया है क्या, भैया मेरे को ये प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, मेरे को ये दिखाना. And if you have a product, so these people also, one would imagine that they would only sell because they're getting margins, but the retailer also has his own reputation to protect. He knows that the lady will buy a pan today, may come buy a mixer tomorrow, will come for something else day after. So he was not going to sell an inferior product or the wrong product to the wrong person. And for us, that has been a very large part of our growth. It has been an interesting part of our growth. The
Mm-hmm.
relationship building with the general trade channel has been important to us in our journey. And we still
Okay.
treat that as a very, very important channel of influence, if I
Mm-hmm.
may put it like that.
And so, where do customers discover you today, and where does the trust get built and the conversion happens?
Uh, I think today uh, discovery is still through word of mouth. We
Mm-hmm.
are definitely advertising online through various channels.
Mm-hmm.
We work with enough social media channels to kind of talk about who we are, and we do that in a transparent way, like I was talking about earlier. Uh, there is still enough and more discoverability happening in the general trade channel.
Okay.
We try and make sure that we are visible there. We have this nice bright orange packaging that we have, which is visible across. It stands out at the counters. Uh, we podcasts like this, different forms of media, but in principle, I think still one of the biggest ways of discovery is I've seen, like, for example, society WhatsApp groups, and people say, does anyone know good utensil? And some people will say Stahl. Some people will take names of our competitors, but that discussion leads to discoverability. And it's also necessary to have good competition. I mean,
Yeah.
the way I put it is that, for example, nobody goes to watch India do net practice. The Indian
Hmm.
cricket team do net practice, but a good India-Pakistan match, whether you watch cricket or you don't, you're going to go and watch it. So having good competition, having good, nice fruitful competition is very important for the growth of the, the business.
And how do you think about marketplaces versus your own channels?
If I was to equate it to the offline world,
Hmm.
it's like having your shop on a high street versus putting your shop in the mall. So the mall
Hmm.
naturally has traffic and it will come in, but there
Hmm.
are also a lot of restrictions on the way that you are displaying yourself. Plus, you have to pay a higher rent. You will have to
Hmm.
take part in the schemes of the mall. You will have to, if they have an end of season sale, you'll have to take part in those.
Hmm.
Your high street retail channel is where you can kind of really show who you are, bring in products,
Hmm.
experiment, do various different things.
Hmm.
But it's a lot harder to get a person into your door on a high street
Hmm.
versus, let's say, in the mall, where a person is just kind of floating around, goes in, goes out. So I don't know if that answers your question,
It
but I
does.
think,
It
yeah,
does. Yeah. And so quick commerce has also changed expectations around, convenience.
yeah,
And cookware is also isn't actually an impulse led category in the same way.
yeah,
As you mentioned, people do their own research before, buying.
yeah,
How are you thinking about that channel? Because I saw Stal in one of the quick commerce apps
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
So what do you think of that?
So it's actually interesting. I think quick commerce is going to affect the retailer at its core, not so much an
Hmm.
Amazon or a marketplace or a D2C website.
Hmm.
I think strong brands will fundamentally do well on quick commerce because there is an inherent demand. If you have a brand, quick commerce becomes easier, or then it's pure price game.
Hmm.
Um, it's also going to change the way retail works. And I'll give an example. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a city. I was in a city in the north, and I was having a conversation with our distributor partner there that we need to quicken the supply to the retailers to get the product to the end consumer.
Hmm.
Because people come and they now nobody's going to say, you wait 10 minutes, I'm getting it from the godown. They'll want it right then and there.
Hmm.
So he was saying, no, we're fast enough. We're supplying to these parts of that city in XYZ like every 2 or 3 days. And as he started saying it, I ordered one of our products on the quick commerce channel. So
Hmm.
I ordered it on Instamart while sitting with him. And while we
Hmm.
were having this discussion, before the point was over, the product was delivered to me.
Hmm.
So immediately his mindset changed, my mindset changed. And it shows that as a business, we have to gear up towards faster and faster delivery.
Hmm.
What quick commerce will bring is definitely the ability to deliver faster. It'll allow us to become more relevant in categories like gifting. You're
Okay.
going out. So if we start, let's say, from a marketing perspective, we've always talked about how Star is a great gift to give. And if you're available, it becomes interesting to kind of put our product out there. Uh, the consumer, however, will have to know about the product before they buy in quick commerce. And that is where the challenge is. So all the branding and all the marketing that we do will affect quick commerce. But from a pure discoverability perspective, other channels are still places that people go.
Got it. You guys, you mentioned you are as you are on retail as well, offline retails as well.
Yeah,
And legacy traditional brands also have a great distribution network.
yeah, they do.
Yeah, so and they have also adopted, e-commerce, quick commerce as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So where do you think style can be? How can they beat?
So I think, let's say the biggest in the country will have a penetration which is roughly about 10 or 15 times as much from a retailer
Mhm,
perspective.
mhm,
However, I think where we are is, we are able to partner with retailers who are actually trying to deliver good value to the consumer. As you penetrate more and more, retailers compete between each other and they start undercutting each other
mhm,
on price,
mhm,
which both kills the brand as well as the retailers lose interest in selling the product.
mhm,
So as a brand, we're very particular that our pricing is fairly stable.
mhm,
We will keep it stable on e-commerce platforms, on quick commerce platforms, on retailer platforms, so that the consumer doesn't ever feel that they're getting cheated if having bought it somewhere and some not somewhere else. Which means that we may not penetrate as many retail outlets, but whoever does it will give you excellent service and will actually live up to the premium that the brand has. And that's
mhm.
how we've approached it.
Great. And as you scale, what feels under the most pressure and what's becoming, harder than you expected?
I think brand building will always be one of the toughest parts of the business.
Mhm,
Distribution, of course, manufacturing. I mean, we scale at more than 50% every year. So to be able to create capacity definitely is really hard.
mhm,
But to be able to reach out and make the brand known to more and more consumers inorganically is always, and you can always make your brand known by showing a logo or showing other things, but it's about who we are and what we're really trying to achieve, which is create joy in the kitchen, create inspiration in the kitchen, making tools that work well, that last long and feel good. And I think communicating that, and
mhm,
especially when we're doing that, educating the customer on what we're doing, which is different,
mhm, mhm,
is I think the hardest part, because we are creating categories, we are creating thought processes, we are creating
mhm.
technologies, and bringing that to market just becomes a lot harder than anything else at this point.
If a global premium cookware brand entered India seriously tomorrow, where do you think they would, underestimate this market, and where do you think they were, that will make the competition more interesting, or they will take that seriously?
So we see enough global players come in on a regular basis, and I think one of the biggest challenge that they will have is to supply or to create products that are there for the Indian consumer
Mhm,
at prices that are valuable, or are that are at value for the Indian consumer. So let's say they start getting it from outside the country, then the tooling and everything kind of really takes a hit. Or a lot of them will find a little bit of a differentiation in the market, but they don't study the consumer in India and the cooking habits enough, unfortunately. And I think that is where a lot of them struggle, and that is where we've been moderately successful. Uh, that being said, I think if a global player really wants to kind of disrupt the market, a lot of them could. But I think a lot of them don't take enough time to understand that us as Indians don't necessarily want what is
mhm,
available globally. We actually need nuanced products. A product, the way a dosa is made in Punjab is very different than the way it's made in Gujarat, and very different than the way it is made in Bangalore. And those
mhm,
nuances have to be understood. And I think that is where a lot of them will struggle.
mhm. Got it. What's expensive in this business in ways consumers actually never see?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question fully. Can I ask you to just maybe rephrase it? I apologize.
A lot of money is utilized when building a brand. Where do you
Yeah.
think consumers usually don't understand where the most of the money usually goes that makes the product this expensive? Maybe marketing, maybe distribution, or actually the product itself.
I think I think two aspects. I think consumers don't realize actually how many people it takes, intelligent people it takes to make a good product. it's very easy to get the second one and the third one. You see what someone else has done and you can pick it up. But like for example, we are trying to develop a product which is potentially can replace cast iron in the market today. A very, very interesting way to actually look at the benefits of cast iron, but taking away all of its negatives. And it
Okay.
takes about a year and a half, 2 years to just research the product.
Mm-hmm.
Many trials, like we'll have to make I don't know how many thousands of pans before we put it into the market.
Mm-hmm.
Once we do it, the next one just has to take what we do and reverse engineer it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think consumers don't get how much it takes. That even a simple thing like a pan, a lot of us tell us इसमें क्या है? It's just one piece of metal that is bent, and you put one handle on, you put make two holes in it, put two rivets in it, and it's ready. But
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of nuance that goes into trying, testing, building, and I think that's where consumers underestimate how the expense on creating a good, new, innovative product.
And where does money actually quietly gets wasted in the business like this?
I think somebody said, I don't remember who it is, that your marketing, you spend 100 rupees, only half works. It just the problem is I don't know which half. I think you can have as much of performance marketing and you can measure as much as you want, but it's very difficult to figure out which part of the money has actually created magic. And I think that is still a place where it's a big question mark. And my father
Yeah.
asked me that on a regular basis. ये पैसा गया किधर?
So I got this the same answer I got on this podcast from another founder. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it's a big challenge.
it is. You can't. I mean, it's money flowing, and you have no clue why it's going out. And especially when you come from manufacturing and you can measure everything else, this one
Mhm.
is. You can say as much that I measure CPC and impressions and this and that and everything. At the end of the day, it's very hard to say what worked.
Yeah. And what operational challenge keep you thinking the most right now?
I think for me at this point exactly is how do we expand capacity,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I educate the customer more and more on what triply is and what products we make, and more than that, the fact that we're actually that cooking can be poetic and that having good tools really can make a big difference in your experience in the kitchen. So I think that is the biggest
Mm-hmm.
challenge still. Actually, all of the else happens. It's just making sure that the consumer understands how we make a difference in their life.
So I got to know that you are an advisor to a lot of young entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So I move on to the next segment where I would require I would ask you to just answer them very quickly.
Hmm.
So this one is called founder cheat sheet.
Okay.
One thing founder should spend more on and one thing less on.
I think one thing a lot of founders don't look at is their operations and supply chain. And I think one thing that founders should spend less on is the amount of time I think they try to find only investors and actually focus on trying to get the
Mhm.
product out there.
And what's one expense that felt important early on but really wasn't?
Um, I was talking about 3% on packaging. I think getting the right brand, and when we say brand, the right was, I would say the right brand assets into place early on makes a
Mm-hmm.
big difference in how it is perceived and pays dividends over the long run.
Mm-hmm.
I think people
Okay.
compromise there a lot.
Okay. What's something you scaled too early?
Uh, that's a good question. Um, I can tell you something I didn't scale fast enough, which I think I spent more time on manufacturing early than I
Hmm.
should have, and I spent lesser time on acquiring the consumer than I should have.
Okay. And what's one assumption you got completely wrong?
That so I used to always assume that you can just put a product out there and it will sell itself, and that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to create a story and you don't have to actually talk about the product
Mm-hmm.
and what it brings to you, and that people will just understand the emotion it's supposed to bring or what it's supposed to do for them. I think people want to be shown what the product can do for them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the assumption that people will just inherently know what the product will do at an emotional level, I think that is an assumption that I would change.
Got it. So this segment is known as Founder 101. If someone were starting from zero in your space, what should they get right first?
I think what I would look at is what habits in the kitchen are still underexplored by the legacy brands. I
Mhm.
think I would go to the kitchen and see that there are enough areas which are open. I would just spend some
Mhm.
time over there and try and figure out what needs to be done.
How should founders validate an idea before investing themselves too much?
I think, and that's a continuous struggle even for us today.
Mhm.
How do a lot of harebrained ideas that we get and we run after it. I think one has to create a discipline of piloting, creating a pilot lot, or creating a minimum viable product, and actually really putting and seeing if people are willing to pay for the product. Not
Mhm.
only testing it from a technical and a, let's say, overall put together standard, but whether the consumer is actually willing to pay and it has enough margins in it.
And what should they focus on in the first 3 to 6 months that people often ignore?
I think people spend a lot of time in trying to tell the story and build the brand. I think people should really, I'm going to repeat the same thing, just kind of figure out where
Mhm.
that need is and build a minimum product. So spend enough and more time with your consumer to just ask. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember, I think my wife used to actually get embarrassed. I would walk into a party and I would walk into the kitchen and I would pick up the biryani pot and see, kiska brand hai, kyun hai, kya hai, and literally conversations around that. And I think, though I think most founders do that, I think it
Mhm.
still needs to be done a lot more. I think
And
people
how
start trying to sell before they build enough of the product.
how would you get your first 50 to 100 customers today?
uh, I would go to a farmer's market and put the product out there. And I've literally done that. So I would still kind of go to a place where people who are potentially my consumers come and actually
Mhm.
stand there with my products and literally
Mhm.
get sell the first 100 pieces over there.
And what's one early sign a founder is building something worth pursuing?
Let me put it like this. I think there are a lot of needs that people are able to identify. But I think if there is a very small niche in that, very small segment in that little area that a founder is able to really speak about and speak about in
Mhm.
detail, to me, then it becomes an idea worth pursuing. So to say that
Mhm.
I need good cookware is good. But if a founder comes to me and says that, listen, I have solved that it takes 12 minutes to clean a cookware, I've brought that down to 3 or 4 minutes. To me,
Mhm.
that's an idea worth pursuing.
I love this answer. Love it.
Yeah.
And then just to clarify a bit, have I seen you
Yeah.
in a TVC of Style recently?
Yeah, so I think I was wearing the same shirt. Uh, we so to kind of show how much engineering goes into a cooker. So cooker is like a bomb, and we have to test it where there's a lot of load on the thing. So to kind of show this, we
Hmm.
actually lifted an entire car on our pressure cooker to show how much load we tested with. And I was sitting in the car, so I think that's where you saw me. It's called
Yes.
Kuch Ye Bhi Utha Lega. So we were trying to pick up different things in the factory, and we ended up picking up the car. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, so the multiple hats that a founder wear on
Yeah.
a day.
And I've recently, you're talking about family, so we've just got a new ad that has come out called Kuch Bhi Nahi Chipkega, and my son is acting in that. So I think
Really?
we're trying to bring him into the business early, train him train him fast and train him soon. Yeah,
Wow, amazing, interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the
what a
show.
pleasure.
What stayed with me with this conversation is how building in a category like cookware is really about solving behavior as much as building product, whether it's Indian cooking realities, manufacturing or
Yeah.
premiumization. There's so much depth in the business and people often see from the outside. So Dhruv, thank you so much for
No,
sharing the journey so openly. This was
I
a
really appreciate.
fascinating conversation.
I really appreciate the time you spent, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you for listening so carefully. It made me want to share, and I'm so grateful. It was really, really nice.
Thank you for listening to Building Actually with Abhishansa. I'll see you in the next episode.